Hey there, welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. My name's Lee Martinuzzi, the host of the show, and this is episode 1120, my interview with Ettele, and we're discussing her book series based on Buddhist philosophy, The Six Perfections. Her fourth book in the series is titled How Joyous Effort Works, The Energy to Benefit Others. We delve into an enlightening conversation about those six perfections and really about how we can strengthen our character and good morals and behaviour through some of these ancient philosophies. I really enjoy these conversations. I find it makes me slow down and think about what's important in life and my behaviours and my character and what I could do to improve, to not only benefit myself but also to benefit others. That's sort of the takeaway I got from this interview with Jeanette today. So I hope you enjoyed as well. Let me know what you think. You can jump on to thehiddenwhy.com. All the show notes are there. You can connect with Jeanette as well, pick up a copy of her book or the book series if you wish, and reach out to me, PM me on socials or reach me through thehiddenwhy.com. Would love to connect with you, would love to chat. Enjoy this interview with Jeanette and have a great day. G'day Jeanette, welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. Great to have you here today, very exciting.
Hi Lee, so nice to see you and to be here.
Thank you for coming. I wanted to You've written a number of books and it's a series of books and you can probably explain it to us better. But before we jump into the books, tell us a little bit about your background.
So my background, on paper, I'm an author, I'm a musician, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother,
Wow.
and a little of everything. My life has not been a straight trajectory. I didn't have a master plan or anything, but as it unfolded, it's been an interesting path. And it's to arrive at this stage in my life, I can see where it all ended up really making sense.
Yeah.
So there are times in those early years when you're just feeling so desperate to have your, as you say, your hidden why revealed to you, that sometimes we just need to live into the experience
And watch it unfold.
and participate in its unfolding. Yeah.
Yeah. I certainly have noticed that change in me over the years from my younger days to now, and even still now, where I look at life sometimes and go, what am I, why am I doing certain things? Don't always make sense to me. And how can I just enjoy more of the process to really live this experience and let it unfold without trying to put pressure onto that pathway, if that makes sense. And I just had a chat with another guy recently about that. And I often find myself, and I think a lot of people can relate, is putting a lot of pressure on trying to push outcomes, which often don't eventuate. Whereas we just sit back and be more mindful. I know we'll talk about that today, but be more mindful and have that higher level of awareness and vision. Things will come through, and we just have to participate in that journey, as you might say.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things I've learned is being open is so important.
Yeah.
Being open to, we might have to not be so rigid in what we think it is, our objective is, but my mother always used to say this or something better was the way she would phrase
Nice.
it, which I really like that, that you want this or something better. And that kind of allows for that openness for it to be not perhaps exactly as you have in mind, but
I like that. I think you've got to be happy with your circumstances, and if you look around, I mean, society today, there's a lot of segmentation and rigidity in how people, their perception of the world and how people what they believe, and I think very closed-minded, not very open to it all, and that's as sort of a whole. But then you're looking within as well, and being more open to the experience within that you're having. But without having a level of self-awareness, how do you get that? I mean, you have to tap into that. And I think a lot of people are closed off from going within because it can be courageous to delve in and really understand how you feel.
yeah. One of the things I think is really important is to really stop and spend some time thinking about what your core values are.
Mm.
And I think that's a really good um, guiding method.
Yeah.
One of the in the when I was in the program to become certified as a life coach, one of the things that was taught to us, which I think is really useful, is to think about someone, either someone you knew or know, or someone in history, a famous person, anyone that's been particularly inspiring to you,
Yeah.
who you've inspired by.
Mm.
And as you talk about that person, it's helpful to have somebody to kind of bounce this off with. You start to reveal what are those values that that person's way of living
Mm.
demonstrates.
Yeah.
And as you start to like list them off, you might come up with 10 or something, but as you start to look more closely at these values that you've identified, you'll find you can kind of organize them under an umbrella of three that sort of represent all of them. You know, sometimes you have just different words, but and when you can identify those values, the metaphor that always came to mind for me is that, do you know when you go to an amusement park when you're a kid and you have to stand next to that wooden cutout to make sure you're big enough to go on the ride?
Yeah.
You have those in
Yeah.
Australia?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got height charts or whatever they call them. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of when you're making decisions or evaluating something and choices you're going to make, it's almost as if you could measure them against that wooden cutout, which would be your values,
Mm.
and ask yourself that question, is this taking me closer to being in alignment with my values, or is it pulling me a little away from those values?
Yeah.
Because when we're in alignment with our values, we're, I think, much happier people. We're much more fulfilled. We're more excited about whatever it is we're doing, whatever efforts involved. We're going to be kind of pumped to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And I talk a lot about values, and part of my um, life map, ultimate life map, I called it, and finding your hidden why, which to a question that we can explore later, I believe evolves because as life evolves, your values change as well. But a part of understanding your value, understanding your hidden why, as I call it, is understanding your values. And when you can live more aligned with those values, you find more joy in that process. Even if it's, you're doing stuff day to day, which you may not thoroughly enjoy, you are more conscious of that decision to do that because it aligns more
Yeah.
closely with your values. And when you do that, you feel more fulfilled and you feel like you have more meaning in doing it because it is actually a connection. And where I've found my life, um, not in pain, what am I word? I'm looking for a word, but when I found my life in distress or not quite content is when I'm doing things that aren't anywhere near aligned with my values because I've had that disconnect.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you say that because I mean I've interviewed a lot of people and talked about many different ways you can find out your values, but for those listening, I think it's a really important activity to do every year, every quarter, and every day, even checking in with the values that you discover. And spending some time this weekend, whether it's half a day or a couple of hours under a tree, at a park, wherever it is where you find most peace, and
Yeah.
really doing some of those activities. And if you just jump into Google or ChatGPT, you can find many examples of how to discover values. And your point was, looking up at your heroes, those people you admire. Someone said to me once, who's your favorite superhero? Often we connect with a superhero, mine's Batman, and there's values there that are similar, right? But
Okay.
there's many ways you can figure out your values. Have you got any other tools that you use for someone listening today to help them identify values?
There was another one that was presented that I'm that could be something some people would be open to trying and some people maybe not, but to think about a time when you were really something happened that really made you so angry, really hurt you or were so
Yeah,
angry. And that's another way to go about it, to think, well, what values were compromised in that
yeah,
situation? What values were um, not respected or that sort of
Yep.
thing is another way to go about it. But I find the other way more, joyful to think about what's inspiring you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is definitely more joyful. But like you said, like things that anger you or frustrate you or bring around negative emotions, sadness, whatever it might be, often are indications of things that you value. And that's why, for whatever reason, it might
Yeah.
have upset you.
Yep. Yep. But it is really helpful to have somebody, a good friend, or if you have a coach or somebody that you trust that you can work with, to sit down and sort of do that with.
Hmm.
Because they might, as you're telling the story, you're talking about this, Batman or whatever, and you're talking about, tell a story about Batman, something he had done, and that you really, really moved you.
Yeah.
As you're doing that, not only are you kind of running through it, but the other person is listening and may find, I think I heard this value in that
Yeah.
story you just told. Does that
Hmm.
resonate for you?
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice to have that.
Yeah, to have someone rebound those things off. And I think it's also important too, because sometimes our mind's distracted by everything that we've been conditioned by
Yeah.
society, right? So sometimes we think it's a value, but the person next to you might go, well, I don't know if that actually relates to you. And so it can make us sort of
Right.
question that again as well.
Well, I
Um,
think I'll go ahead. Sorry.
you go. No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think there are, common values that we all share, such as, honesty and respect. I mean, there are certain values that probably everybody would say, but I think the ones that feel most strong for the individual are the ones that you really want to hone in on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of it comes down for me in my life, and it started probably in my 20s. Um,
Mhm.
was to give myself more time and self-awareness. I think I've always been a fairly open book and, open to things like that, but it took work within to really assess who I am and what I meant, and I'm still on that journey, of searching and figuring it out. But
Yeah.
awareness and mindfulness, I know you talked about that pre-interview. Do you want to go into what mindfulness is? I mean, you've written books based on Buddhist philosophy and teachings, right? And that's your book series.
Yeah.
The one in front of me here is, which I'll put links in the show notes, How Joyous Effort Works, the Energy to Benefit Others. What have you learned about mindfulness through your experience?
A lot.
A
And
lot.
it goes back, it goes back to when I first became interested in the Buddhist philosophy, because
How long
really
ago
that's
was
what
that?
it, uh, 16 years ago.
Yep.
I had been reading books that really, one book in particular that inspired me to learn more. And so I started seeking out other books and one after another and after another. And I just found that mindfulness, being aware of your thoughts, being aware of how your thoughts can influence and do influence your actions, but so much more about understanding a certain kind of view. Um, of course, compassion is part of that. Anyway, one thing led to another, and every book I read said if you really want to incorporate these teachings into your life in a meaningful way, you need to find a teacher. And I live in Connecticut, which is a tiny little state in the northeastern US.
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with that New England area. And I really didn't think that anywhere near where I lived there would be a place where I would find a teacher. So I went online thinking I'd probably have to go into New York City, which is, maybe an hour and a half trip for me to find a teacher. And I went online, and it turned out that 5 miles from my house,
Well,
just 5 miles down this little country winding road, is a Tibetan Buddhist Center for Universal Peace. And this is where I met Tibetan Buddhist monks who, yeah, are not only are just amazing teachers, but when you're in their presence, you feel that like peace, you feel that kindness and compassion and a deep wisdom. And I knew just being in that environment and listening to them and observing how they live, that I encountered something that could really have a lot of potential to add a lot of value and depth and peace to my life. And so for you to say, ask me, what did you learn? It's so hard to condense 16
Yeah.
years of just, little by little. But I will say that it was another coincidence in attending these classes, maybe 2 years in. There was a break in one of the classes I was attending, and I met somebody. We got to talking during one of the breaks about how practical we found these teachings to be, and how even though they're 2,500 years old,
Mm.
human nature is still human nature, and
Yeah.
they still apply. It all
Yeah.
still applies. And we know in our Western culture, we just have this a lot of stress in our
Mm.
culture, the pace that people are keeping and the things that they get, all upset about. We felt it would be so nice if we could bring these teachings into something that would feel accessible to a contemporary Westerner that's not going to go walking into a Buddhist
Yeah.
temple. And I had done I'd been writing some newsletters to promote my coaching, but I hadn't been a writer that I knew of myself to be. And it turns out he was in the publishing industry and had
Yeah.
started his own imprint independently for books that were dedicated to Buddhist teachings,
Yeah.
and told me about this idea he had had for a series based on a teaching called The Six Perfections, or the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And he invited me to take a stab at writing 10 pages of the first book, which was on the first perfection of generosity. And that's how it began. And so in the process of writing, sharing all this background because it's in the process of writing these books that actually really helped deepen my own learning, because I have to understand something before I can then write about it
Yeah.
and put it into fiction where I create contemporary characters that go through the learning, the reflection, the meditations, the putting these teachings into practice.
Mm.
So it's I think mindfulness is a pretty vast topic, but I would say simply put, it's in my opinion, it's awareness that's coupled with an accurate understanding of how things are functioning, how things
Mm.
function.
It's yeah, nice, beautiful journey that you've been on with yeah, like getting into that and writing those books. Quite remarkable actually. And you wouldn't have ever pictured that happening, I suppose, but you
That's
allowed
what I
it to come
mean.
in.
Yes. Yeah, so many amazing things happened, that I didn't expect. For instance, this book is How Joyous Effort Works. I was able to receive a foreword from His Holiness the Dalai Lama
Yeah, I saw
for
that.
this book.
Amazing.
And that was a moment, when I got
Yeah.
the email that they had said yes, and there it was. And Jane Goodall has given an endorsement, and Robert Thurman, and all of these things were just, it's like the energy of, it's cumulative energy of 16 years of learning and applying what I've been learning in my life, and then writing about it.
How do you let go? Because I'm assuming this would have come up along the way, but how do you let go of expectations, I suppose? Because we have, expectations about how we think life should be. And to have faith or trust in the journey, you have to sometimes just let go of those things. And I don't know if there's a simple answer to that, but
Um, if I understand your question correctly, and if I give you the wrong answer,
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
can try again. I think one of the things that's really important to understand is impermanence is like is
Yeah,
the constant in life,
yeah.
and things are always changing. And we we have to understand that sometimes we have this idea that something is going to deliver happiness when actually that thing in itself has no capacity to offer lasting happiness because everything is impermanent.
Hmm.
Even ideas, even feelings, relationships. You can fall head over heels in love with somebody and be glued to the hip. And then how many times do you see those relationships kind of turn where it's
Yeah,
like, I don't want to ever see that person again. So things change. And so perhaps that's helpful when something that you really had hopes for kind of really reevaluate and understand that perhaps that thing wouldn't be the end all of happiness anyway.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, the whole idea of impermanence is fantastic. And I just like the idea of thinking that I own nothing in life, because everything, sorry,
But that you like the idea that you
own
what in
own
life?
nothing, own
Oh,
nothing.
on nothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
And by the end of it, it's just me and my thoughts, as it was at the start. And yeah, I guess, I mean, I meditate in my own way, and that certainly helps me just stay grounded to
Right.
those sort of things. Um, but it's still, I guess it's still hard, isn't it, to think that everything changes and nothing's permanent, and so be it, without stopping all hope or ambition in life as well to what you're driving towards.
I think that that's one of the early practices is to really meditate on impermanence and
Hmm.
to recognize, our lives are impermanent. It's not in a morbid way, but to realize, okay, I've got this life. No one knows what our shelf life is.
Yeah.
By that expression. And so, so we have to really make best use of it, find happiness in that present moment
Mm,
and use it wisely, use it
mm,
well.
yeah.
Be again, maybe going back to those values, those things that matter.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the peripheral stuff, the glittery things that people can get all drawn to and attracted to, as I said before, really, you might have happiness for that moment, but it's not that substantial kind of, and it's not saying don't enjoy it
Mm,
while it's happening. It's not a downer. It's like be happy, enjoy that experience, enjoy that relationship, enjoy that job, whatever it is. But don't glom onto it like it's something that's gonna always be in that way.
yeah. Yeah. I find happiness is the journey that we all are on. And I sort of talk about it from not a superficial form of happiness where like pleasure centers and things like that, dopamine hits, whatever it might be, but a sense of happiness and joy, regardless of um, the adversity or joy you might be experiencing in any given moment. And if you can find happiness in any given moment, then that's
Yeah,
that sort of true deep sense of happiness, um, but can really only come from, again, that level of awareness in oneself
yeah,
and what's
yeah.
happening.
It's important.
Tell us about your books
And
and your stories there. You've written about a character, Troy, I believe.
yeah, Troy
Who's
is a
Troy?
young. Who is Troy?
Who's Troy? Yeah.
I made him up.
Hmm.
He's probably a conglomerate. I mean, he's I've raised sons and, of course they had
Okay.
friends around, but some of Troy's life reflects my own experience when I was young. I mean, Troy was drinking a lot and getting into fights. That wasn't me. I was not, I was not doing that.
Not part of Fight
But
Club.
no, not at all. Um, but Troy had I'd say when his parents divorced, his father left his mother for somebody else, and that hit him really hard. And he went finally, the woman that his father married was really nasty, very harsh to him, mean to him. She really had it in for him. And so the good thing was is he was able to go off to college where he didn't have to be around her. Um, but while he was away, his closest friend was killed, and that just did him in. That loss was just so painful for him. And he started, kids in college, they're going to drink. He kind of went overboard with the drinking and
Yeah.
was getting into a lot of fights, failed his classes. His girlfriend had enough of him, broke up with him, and he ended up having to come back home and stay with his dad and Maureen, the stepmother. And there was a little half sister that he now had too, who adores him. So that's a really sweet relationship he has with his little half sister.
Yeah.
But it's the way this story unfolds. The good thing he does is he gets home. He goes, okay, I'm gonna try. He knew he needed to straighten himself out. He knew he had. I won't swear, but he knew he had made a mess of things, and he did enroll in classes at a community college. He got a job working at a diner, but he knew there was more he needed to do to make his life right again, and he just didn't know how to begin. And so the way this story goes, the theme is like when the student is ready, the master appears. And it was taking his little sister to her piano lesson that he met, who became his first teacher. And that was all by accident. And as each book goes along, he meets a new teacher. So I need to just add that I've written these books in such a way that they do not need to be read in any particular order.
Yep.
So you could read the fourth book, and the backstory of the others is woven into the story. It's not like you're going to get, oh, this is what you missed before. It's an actual just weaving in of the previous stories.
Yeah.
So with each teacher, and he really is earnest in his determination to get his life together. Um, these teachings have started to mean more to him. And he's met a new girlfriend that he's met at the diner where he works part-time. And by the time the fourth book starts, How Joyous Effort Works, he's gotten to a point where it's summer break and he's decided, you know what, these teachings are really making a difference in my life. I want to dedicate my summer to really going in more deeply into these teachings and to developing a deeper practice. And wants to find a teacher deliberately this time. The others kind of just happened for him to meet. So that's he does meet a teacher in this book. It's a character whose name is Jules. He's an older man who, do you know what a luthier is?
No.
A lot of people don't. It's someone who builds and repairs stringed instruments.
Okay.
And Troy is also a guitar player, so this was kind of a nice extra appeal with Jules, is that Jules agreed to work with him to teach him. And what he does is he uses some of the luthier's techniques as metaphor and meditative support to help present some of these deeper aspects of the Buddhist view. Um, and one of Troy's big dilemmas is, these teachings, I love this path, I love doing this study and practice, but I also want to I'm just an average, a normal guy. I want to have a normal life. I want to have he would love to marry this girlfriend he has. He'd like to have a family, wants to have a career. Can you do it? Can you do this both as deeply as he wants to do it? And that's sort of what his journey is like in this fourth book, how that Jules helps him with that and teaches him quite a bit.
Okay. You talk about, is it the six, what did you call them?
The six perfections.
The six perfections. So just run us through those six
Yes.
perfections quickly.
Okay.
I know
So
generosity was the first book.
how generosity works, yeah.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that Shantideva, who was who gave this teaching on the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, it was in Sanskrit. So I'm using English words. People might have heard them with different translations,
Yeah.
but what I'm familiar with is the first perfection is generosity. The second is moral and ethical discipline, which sounds really severe. So
Hmm.
it really isn't. It is the Dalai Lama says that, if we could have secular ethics, it's not like a biblical thing, you're going to go to hell if you don't do this or that, but just some nice practical guidance on, again, mindfulness comes into this, because if we're mindful of what our actions of body, speech, and mind are, then we're practicing ethical behavior. But anyway, that is a
Yeah.
harsh
Yeah.
title. So we changed it to How the Root of Kindness Works, because if you are observing this sort of practice, it really is the root of kindness.
Yes. Okay.
And then the third perfection is the perfection of patience, which isn't meant to mean where you just kind of seethe inside while you appear patient on the outside. It's more of just really being able to, again, have this view where you understand things differently. You might understand someone's suffering. You just
Mm.
have this ability to have more patience with other people with a compassionate heart.
Yeah. And
And when you
patience,
have
patience for oneself too.
patience for oneself, yep, yep.
I mean,
And
I
when
think
you
they all
have,
relate to both internal and external, right? To
I
generosity
think
to
so.
oneself and generosity externally, kindness inwardly and outwardly.
Yeah, and I think that when it is extended outwardly with that genuine compassion,
Hmm.
it's it's make it's just can't by default, it's inward too.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, I think it goes around and, you know, yeah, I mean, if we put it within, we're better off putting it out. Like kindness, for example, if we're kind within, we're likely going to be kinder externally as well. And if we're doing
Right.
that, that's going to come back to us with kindness.
Yeah, I
So it
think you're
just sort
right.
of
Yeah.
perpetuates both.
Hmm. So so patience is the third, and the
Third.
fourth is joyous effort,
Yep.
which is once you start to understand in this context the value of the teachings and the
Yep.
benefit you're receiving and the benefit of others to others through your practice. That's like a motivation. This is the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, and so Bodhisattva, that's their MO, right? To to benefit to be achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. That's sort of the objective of a bodhisattva. Now we're all just kind of regular people. We're not bodhisattvas, but it's just that's why this is always the benefit to benefit others.
Yeah.
The fifth perfection is the perfection of concentration,
Okay.
and the sixth is the perfection of wisdom.
Interesting. You got a couple more books to write, don't you?
I don't think I'll be writing the next two.
No?
No, well, we'll see. We'll see how this one goes. The publisher that I worked with ran into there were some changes in his life and professionally, and there was COVID. There was a lot of fallout from that. So he wasn't able to actually complete this book, but in a contract that we came up with in the reversion of rights to me, I could use his imprint and everything. They were very supportive, but I'm funding this. It's not self-publishing, but it's kind of like I felt so strongly that this book needed to be, if I had gotten to this point, one of the teachings in joyous effort is if you begin something, complete it.
Mm.
And I wasn't gonna leave this not completed.
Yeah.
And so to me, I was just determined that this was going to be something I would make sure I got out to
Well,
whatever
I hope you
extent it
do.
could.
I hope you do.
Thank you.
I want
Thank
to
you.
talk, not in detail, I suppose, but maybe just touch on each of these modalities, if you will. Um, and maybe a tool we could share is if we could encourage a bit of meditation around each of these points, and maybe that's, I don't know, that's the best way to do it. But if we, show some reflection and time in meditation on each of these points, we might better understand it and better think about how it is currently in our lives, and I guess understanding if it's not there or what we can do better to enhance it. Because I assume they will all have a positive impact not only on the self but also others around you. Um, and ultimately, I mean, you talked about the last one being wisdom, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like all of those things will lead to a greater level of wisdom in the journey.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
I think I know. I feel like it's telling you that that's great that you got to that already. Yeah. So really all of these dovetail together,
Yeah.
and the teaching on wisdom in Buddhist teaching of wisdom is can get very involved.
Hmm.
It's more than I could do justice to in this
Yeah.
setting right here. But it's one, maybe if I could find the simplest way to put it without getting too into the weeds, would be to say, to understand the interdependence of everything, that even that nothing exists inherently.
Yeah.
And so when we understand that, that's another reason to help let go, as you were asking earlier,
Hmm.
because what is everything is always independence on other
Yeah.
causes, conditions, other people, other beings, whether it's our food that we eat or anything, just our fact of our existence. We
Yeah.
didn't just pop in here, you know,
Nothing
all
is in
together. We,
isolation. Hmm.
every, that's a nice word for it. What do you mean by it's an oscillation?
No, nothing is in isolation.
Oh, isolate. Oh, sorry.
Oscillation, maybe. I'll have to think about that one.
Well,
I
I
sort
thought
of look
that's
at
really cool.
what were you thinking when I said oscillation?
Oscillation is like Oscilation. It's just a bit of the accent. I didn't
Oh, okay.
I didn't catch.
I sort of
Oscillation.
look at, oh, you go.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
I was saying I was looking at wisdom and thinking about, um, and it sort of started our conversation like this too, but wisdom is the ability to make better decisions in life, right? And we talked about the hidden why and understanding your values to allow you to make better decisions as it revolves around your values and how you should live your day-to-day life and therefore the life in total, and lead to more joy and happiness in life, regardless of your current circumstances. And if I look at those points that you raised, the generosity, kindness, patience, joyous effort, um, what was the fifth one? Conservation?
Concentration.
Concentration. I can't even read my words I wrote here.
That's
Concentration. I mean, I think practicing those things will obviously lead to you being able to make better decisions around your behaviors and actions and thoughts.
practicing those things will actually be good decisions.
Yeah.
It's just like it just you can't go wrong
Yeah.
if you're practicing those things.
How would you encourage one to, I mean, obviously we can go out there and do what you've done and delve right into these topics, but to encourage someone today listening to this to go away and obviously you can read the books here, but what would you do to encourage them to jump into each of these points? to get a better understanding of how it's relatable to their life right now.
It's, if you're, I can't, in this context, I really can't separate it from the Buddhist view.
Hmm.
But I will say this isn't about becoming Buddhist. This isn't about religion. This is, as the Dalai Lama says, he's not out for people to convert to be Buddhist. Stay with your traditions, but if the teachings offer something that's useful for you, then work with it.
Yeah.
So if it's not offensive to somebody to explore, just to read on the way it's presented in the Buddhist teachings, then they can, because I feel like we have to be, I want to be so respectful to other traditions and other religions, and you know, if there's an openness to just explore the philosophical view of the Buddhist teachings, I think that people would find there's no real conflict with their
Absolutely.
own tradition, but it might just actually enhance whatever they're already engaged
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I find joy in Buddhist teachings, and I find joy in Stoicism and ancient philosophies.
Yeah.
And I think they're, regardless of your religious background, I think they all cross over.
Have you ever heard of Joseph Campbell?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen his it was a series of, I think, 5 or 6 interviews with Bill Moyers. It was back in the 80s, but it's still on YouTube. It was a PBS thing. And he talked about, it was brilliant. He talked about these different, it's called The Power of Myth.
Yeah.
And he talked about these different cultures, indigenous cultures, and their myths, their spiritual traditions, and their stories, and how, thousands of years ago, where people weren't able to like really communicate with each other at great distances, so many of these were the same. They had different ways of, in their art representing these energies, but the bottom line is pretty universal.
Mm.
And I think that's kind of what you're saying, that
They all relate. Yeah. And I mean, they
they
give you
all
good,
relate.
grounded philosophies on how best to live a good life. And talking about that, I mean, we have so much distraction and chaos happening all around us now. Imagine living back 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, where you had, I would think, a lot more time to contemplate and think and discuss and share stories that led
Yeah.
to, better appreciation for the life. Whereas now we don't get
It,
that.
you know, you just said that sharing stories, that were meaningful then, I'm sure. But they also had to live so close to nature,
Mm.
right? Like, I feel like here in this society, we're all like, we wouldn't know how to survive
No,
if
no.
if we didn't have a supermarket and that we just would, but at that time they were so connected with nature
Mm.
that probably a lot of wisdom just became part of, recognizing that they were connected with this also.
Yeah. Well, a lot more time to appreciate nature and how life works. In death, they could sit
Yeah.
there and talk about it and come up with ideals about what it all means. And, if they were without food, they could, talk about their feelings and how that related. Whereas we don't do that anymore. We don't need to.
No, I guess that's when I guess some of these cultures had rituals for if they needed rain, they would have the dances and
Yeah.
their own spiritual practices that were calling on the whoever, the gods, whatever, to bring rain, whatever conditions it was they needed to make their lives better. So it was just kind of innate for them, maybe. I don't know. It's
It'll
not
be
something I
fascinating
studied.
to travel back in time to do that. Um, Jeanette, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing.
Yes.
Guys, there's 4 books there, so I'll stick the links of each one of the books in the show notes at thehiddenwhy.com. Obviously, you're doing coaching and teachings. Is there a place where people can reach out to you and connect?
Yeah, my website is the best way, and that's janetettele.com. And
janetettele.com. I'll stick that in
if
the
you
show
have that
notes
in
too.
your show notes, yeah.
Yeah, no, perfect. Been an absolute pleasure, Jeanette. Hope you've enjoyed.
It was great to see you and meet you and have this conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you so
likewise.
much.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks so much,
Thank
guys. Check it out at thehiddenwhy.com. Live more fully, have more meaning, find more joy. Until next time, we'll speak soon. Bye. So there you have it, my interview with Jeanette Ettele. What did you think? Let me know. Jump on socials, PM me, or you can jump on thehiddenwhy.com and click the show link. You'll see all the notes there, plus links to Jeanette if you want to connect with her, and also her books. You can support the show by using those links to purchase copies of any books that we share on this show. I have also written a book called The Ultimate Life Map, all about a journey towards greater freedom, fulfillment, and happiness. And that's what the journey I've been on. That's why this podcast exists. I've been running it for close to a decade now. And I believe we're all seeking this greater sense of deep happiness. Not this superficial happiness that we get surrounded by in society these days. We want this deeper sense for happiness, and that comes through a greater sense of freedom, fulfillment, meaning, purpose. And I love to hear other people's life stories and share that. And that's why we do this podcast, to share it with you, to try and help give back some value to myself and the audience as well that's listening. So if you know any suitable guests that you think might be a great fit for the show, reach out, let me know. And also, if you're interested in having a chat about your life's journey, perhaps you're seeking more freedom, fulfillment, happiness, and a greater sense of meaning in your life, reach out. I'd love to jump on a call with you and have a conversation. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, peace, passion, and purpose. Speak soon.